Hey guys, today I want to start by giving you a quick overview of exactly what an AV block is. So when we work through chapter 11, we'll be working through the different kinds of AV blocks. But in general, I want you to understand exactly what we're dealing with when we're dealing with an AV block. The first thing that we need to remember is the electrical conduction system pathway. Remember, step 1 is the SA node, the sinoatrial node. Step 1 is the pacemaker of the heart. This is where all impulses originate. Step 2 in the cycle, the impulses travel through the interatrial tracts. And once they get through the interatrial tracts, they go into the atrium. Once they hit the atrium, this makes the atrium, the electrical impulses cause the atrium to contract, to squeeze. And this is steps 1, 2, and 3, the SA node, the interatrial tracts, and the atrium cause, once those 3 steps happen and the atrium contracts, this writes what we know is the P wave on the EKG strip. And step 4 is the internodal tracts, and step 5 is the AV node. Step 6 is the bundle of His. Step 7 is the bundled branches, which go off to left and right. You have your left and right bundle branches. And then step 8 is your Purkinje fibers, and step 9 is the ventricle. So remembering that pathway is super important when we're determining the rhythm strips. So let's talk about the AV node and the AV block. Let's talk about the AV block. What we first need to know is, what is an AV block? What exactly is happening? When we look at this figure, you'll see here, this is the sinus node. That is step 1. That is the pacemaker. So it fires the current. The current travels through the interatrial tracts and it goes out to the atrium. And this causes the atrium to contract. Then the current leaves the atrium, it goes through the internodal tracts down to the AV node. Well, when we talk about an AV block, this is what's happening. This is where it's happening, in the AV node. It can also happen in the bundle branches, and we'll get into that further as we go. But just understanding the basic concept of what an AV block is very important. So looking here, everything fires as it should in the SA node. It travels through the interatrial tracts and hits the atrium. The atrium contracts, it goes through the internodal tracts and gets to the AV node. Well, here we go. Here's where the problem's at. The problem is at the AV node. Or the problem could be in the bundle branches, but it's in this area of the heart. So just remember, everything's working fine up here, and then once it gets to this point, it stops. And looking at the next slide, this will explain a block in the bundle branches. This is still considered an AV block. However, the current makes it through the AV node and through the bundle of His, but when it gets down to the left and right bundle branches, you see this is the stopping point. So when we think about an AV block, we need to automatically think this is the area of the heart that is affected. The current is traveling, it's following its path, but when it gets here, we have a hiccup. There's a problem in this vicinity of the heart. In this particular slide, this is the bundle branches. This is where the problem's at. But in this slide, the AV node is where the problem's at. So when we think about an AV block, just remember what step and where we're talking about in the pathway of circulation. Moving forward, let's go back and discuss what happens. The sinus node, again, it fires impulses as usual, but there's a problem down the line. We know the problem is within the AV node or the bundle branches, just like we discussed. There are different types and different degrees of AV blocks, and I'm going to go into the different degrees of the AV block in a separate video for you guys. But before we go into that, I want you to understand what is exactly the different types of blocks that we may have. When we have an AV block, we have an underlying rhythm that is sinus. And the reason we have an underlying rhythm that is a sinus rhythm is because the pacemaker fires, the current travels through the interatrial tracts, it hits the atrium, and then we get to our hiccup. But a sinus rhythm is a rhythm that starts in the sinoatrial node. So just understand that sinus rhythms come from this area of the heart. Sinus rhythms don't come from anywhere down here or any other areas of the heart. They only come from this area of the heart. So when we think about a sinus rhythm, we know that the sinus rhythm is initiated in the sinoatrial node. Now, looking back at the degrees of an AV block, we have a first degree, a second degree, and a third degree. And again, we're going to get deeper into that as we move forward. But first, there's some different things that I want you to understand about an AV block. What happens with an AV block is the SA node fires, and then the roadblock causes one of three things to happen. So the SA node fires here, and then there's a roadblock in this area right here of the heart. And when we get to that roadblock, one of three different things can happen when we're discussing an AV block. The first thing is a delay can happen. With delays, all of the impulses make it through the block and they make it to the ventricle, but they make it at a slower pace. So the impulses start here, they travel through the interatrial tracts, they hit the atrium, and when they get to the AV node, they're slowed down. They're slowed down more than normal. The AV node naturally causes a split-second delay in the perfect heart rhythm, but with an AV block, it slows it down more than normal. So when the impulse gets to this area of the heart, the brakes is put on. But when we talk about the one of the three different types, the first one being the delay, with a delay, the impulses are slowed, but all of them still make it through and they go to the ventricle. So your electrical impulse is slowed down, but they still continue to travel to the ventricles. They just have a little stopping point. But they resume and they all make it to the ventricles. Now we're going to talk about the second of the third thing that can happen, and that is the partial interruption. With the partial interruption, the SA node that we're looking at here fires. It travels through the interatrial tracts. It hits the atrium. It goes down the internodal pathway and it gets to the AV node. When it gets to the AV node, some of these impulses, this one may go through, but the next time the SA node fires, it may not go through to the ventricles. So some impulses get through here and some do not with the partial. And when we talk about a complete block means that none of the impulses get through here to the ventricles. The SA node fires, it makes it all the way to this area of the heart, and then it's cut off, it's stopped. The ventricles do not contract from the electricity that was generated in the SA node because it does not pass through this area of the heart. So do know the difference in the one of the three things that can happen. The delay simply halts the process, but all impulses go through. With a partial interruption, some of the impulses make it through to the ventricle and some do not. And with a complete block, none of them make it through here. None of the impulses that was generated here make it past this point. So I hope that helps, and I will be going further into the different types of blocks in some separate videos, but if you have any questions, please see me.